Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. This is the WINRAD Broadcasting Service, and I am Walter Hartley, bringing you the evening news on this Thursday, April the 2nd, 2026. We are now in the 34th day of the war with Iran. Last night, the president spoke to the nation for 19 minutes from the cross hall of the White House. He said the war is nearing completion. He said American forces will hit Iran extremely hard for another 2 to 3 weeks. He threatened to bring Iran back to the Stone Ages. And this morning, oil prices surged more than 6%. Asian markets tumbled, and the American embassy in Baghdad told every United States citizen in Iraq to leave immediately. We have a great deal to tell you. We go first to Edward James Whitmore in Washington.
The president's address was the first formal speech to the nation since the war began on February the 28th. In roughly 19 minutes, he made 4 principal arguments. First, that the war is necessary. Second, that it has largely been won. Third, that it must continue for another 2 to 3 weeks. And fourth, that it will end shortly thereafter. He said the United States is on track to complete all of its military objectives very shortly. He cited the destruction of Iran's Navy, Air Force, missile production facilities, and nuclear capabilities. He recognized the 13 American service members who have been killed and said their sacrifice must be honored by completing the mission. He attributed rising gasoline prices entirely to what he called Iran's deranged terror attacks on commercial tankers and neighboring countries. And he issued a direct threat. If no deal is reached within 2 to 3 weeks, the United States will destroy Iran's electric generating plants and target its oil. Simultaneously, he said he would bring Iran back to the Stone Ages where they belong. The reaction was immediate and divided. Secretary of State Rubio, appearing on Fox News before the speech, said the United States can see the finish line and is on or ahead of schedule. Oil markets did not share that confidence. Brent crude surged 6.9% to $108.15 per barrel. The American benchmark rose 6.4% to $106.55. Asian markets fell sharply overnight. Japan's Nikkei dropped 2.4%. South Korea's Kospi fell 4.5%. Analysts said the speech offered no details on an exit strategy and no concrete path to reopening the Strait of Hormuz. The president said countries that rely on the strait must take care of that passage themselves and should grab it and cherish it. He also told allied nations that the United States will not be there to help them anymore. One additional development from Washington this morning. The American embassy in Baghdad issued an urgent warning to all United States citizens in Iraq to leave the country immediately, citing threats from Iran-affiliated armed groups who may target American civilians and their associates within 24 to 48 hours. More than 30 countries are expected to join a virtual meeting organized by the United Kingdom on how to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. British Prime Minister Starmer said 35 nations have signed a statement committing to restore maritime security in the waterway.
Thank you, Edward. Stay with us, ladies and gentlemen. We go now to Theodore Charles Bennett overseas.
The bombs continued to fall during the president's speech and after it. In Iran, an airstrike struck the home of Hengam Kharazi, a former Iranian foreign minister and senior policy advisor. His wife was killed. Kharazi himself was seriously injured. Iranian officials described the strike as an attempt to derail diplomacy, noting that Kharazi was overseeing preparations for a possible meeting between Iranian officials and Vice President Vance through Pakistani mediation. Israeli strikes also hit the strategically important Hengam Island in the Strait of Hormuz, wounding 7 people. The Israeli Air Force bombed a base of the Revolutionary Guard's ground forces in Tehran and struck ballistic missile storage sites in Tabriz. The Israeli military reported that Iran has begun relocating its security headquarters to mobile structures after the destruction of its fixed command centers, and that Israeli warplanes struck several of those mobile sites while Iranian commanders were operating inside them. Iran fired 4 salvos of ballistic missiles at Israel since midnight, some armed with cluster warheads. 4 people were wounded in Bnei Brak, including 2 babies. The attacks came on the first full day of Passover. Israeli missile defense systems continue to intercept the majority of incoming fire. The Israeli military says Iran's missile rate has slowed to between 10 and 15 per day, down from 90 on the first day of the war. But the missiles continue to come, and each one that penetrates carries the potential for mass casualties. The Revolutionary Guard Corps made good on part of its threat to American commercial interests. The Guard named 18 American technology companies, including Apple, Google, Meta, Microsoft, and NVIDIA, as targets for retaliation. The statement, released through the semi-official Tasnim news agency, said the company's facilities in the Gulf would be struck beginning Wednesday evening Tehran time in retaliation for the killing of Iranian officials. The Guard accused the companies of enabling assassinations through the provision of technology and intelligence. In Lebanon, at least 50 people were killed within 24 hours in Israeli attacks. The death toll since March the 2nd has risen to more than 1,268. 1.2 million people have been displaced. Israel killed a senior Hezbollah commander in a naval strike on Beirut on Wednesday. Israel's defense minister reiterated that homes in southern Lebanon would be demolished and that displaced residents would not be allowed to return. In Iraq, unable to export oil through the Gulf, the government has begun shipping crude by tanker truck through Syria, a measure of the desperation that has gripped the region's economies. The numbers tell a story of their own tonight. The United Arab Emirates has now intercepted 438 ballistic missiles, 19 cruise missiles, and more than 2,000 drones since February the 28th. More than 3,000 people have been killed across the Middle East, more than 1,900 in Iran, more than 1,200 in Lebanon, 19 in Israel, 13 American service members, and tonight oil stands at $108 a barrel, and the President of the United States has promised 2 to 3 more weeks of extremely hard strikes. And with that, I send it back to you, Walter.
Ladies and gentlemen, one other story tonight. At Cape Canaveral, Florida, on Wednesday afternoon, NASA's Artemis II rocket lifted off, carrying 4 astronauts on the first crewed mission around the moon since 1972. The launch proceeded on schedule despite the war. It is a reminder that even in the darkest hours, the human impulse to reach beyond ourselves does not stop. We wish them Godspeed. 34 days, ladies and gentlemen. The President has spoken. He says the war is nearly over. He says 2 to 3 more weeks. Iran says it is prepared for 6 months. Oil is climbing again. The markets are falling again. An embassy is telling Americans to leave. A former foreign minister's wife is dead in the rubble of her home. 2 babies are wounded in Bnei Brak. And somewhere above us tonight, 4 Americans are flying toward the moon. Hold them all close, every last one. This is Walter Hartley for the WinRad Broadcasting Service. And now, a word from our friends at the Griadio Vintage Wireless Company. In uncertain times, there is comfort in a voice you trust coming through a speaker built to last. The Griadio Vintage Bluetooth radio brings you the warmth of Golden Age design with all the clarity of modern sound. Handsome walnut cabinet, rich, full tone, connects to your telephone or any wireless device. Visit Griadio through the link in our description. The Griadio Vintage Wireless, built for the voice, built for the age. And now, from the home front, here is Dorothy Wilson.
Well, good evening, ladies. And to those celebrating Passover, I hope your Seder table was beautiful last night. Now listen, tomorrow is Good Friday, and that means no meat. I know some of you are already thinking about it, so let me give you something tonight that you can plan for tomorrow. But first, tonight's supper, because you still have to eat tonight, and I have got something quick. This is my skillet sausage and white beans, and it takes about 20 minutes. Here is what you need. 1 pound of smoked sausage sliced into rounds. 1 can of white beans, drained and rinsed. That is the 15-ounce size, Great Northern or cannellini, whatever you can find. 1 small onion diced, 2 cloves of garlic chopped, 1 can of diced tomatoes, the 14-ounce size, a teaspoon of dried oregano or Italian seasoning, salt and pepper, and a tablespoon of olive oil or butter. Heat the oil in a big skillet over medium heat. Toss in the sausage rounds and cook them until they brown up on both sides. Takes about 4 minutes. Add the onion and garlic and cook another 2 or 3 minutes until they soften. Pour in the tomatoes with all the juice and the beans. Stir in the oregano, salt, and pepper. Let the whole thing simmer for about 10 minutes until it thickens up and everything gets friendly with each other in the pan. And that is supper. Serve it with bread for dipping. Crusty bread if you have it. Plain bread if you do not. It does not matter. The broth at the bottom of that skillet is worth every last piece. $5, 20 minutes, 1 pan. Now, for tomorrow, Good Friday, here is what I want you to do tonight. Take a pound of dried pasta out of the cupboard and set it on the counter. Find a can of tuna fish and a can of cream of mushroom soup. If you have frozen peas, pull those out too. Tomorrow evening, boil the noodles, drain them, stir in the soup and the tuna and the peas, pour it into a baking dish, sprinkle some crushed crackers or breadcrumbs on top, and bake it at 350 for 25 minutes. That is your Good Friday tuna noodle casserole, and it will cost you about $3. Plan ahead, ladies. That is half the battle. Good night, and God bless.